2025 is going to change climbing on Mount Everest forever. From shocking new rules to Sherpas striking to permit prices so high it's making even millionaires wince. Everest is entering an entirely new era, and whether you're a climber, a dreamer, or just someone fascinated by what humans are willing to risk to touch the sky, this year's climbing season might be the last one that even resembles the Everest we thought we knew. As always, viewer discretion is advised. If you wanted to summit Everest in the past, here's how it typically worked. You land in Kathmandu, fly to Lukla, hike to base camp through stunning Himalayan villages, and spend weeks slowly ascending and descending between high-altitude camps, letting your lungs adapt. You rest, acclimatize, and wait. And when the winds die and the skies open, you make your push to the top of the world. But in 2025, that old playbook just got shredded. You have to climb a mountain of brand new regulations to summit Everest this season. Some are intended to protect the mountain, some to protect the climbers, and some, depending on who you ask, to protect the economy. Everest's current most pressing problem is overpopulation. Everest has become too dangerous, too crowded, and too exploitative of the local Sherpa community. In 2024, 388 permits were issued to prospective climbers, all of whom came along with their guides or Sherpas, putting close to 1,000 people on the mountain, a number that continues to strain both the environment and safety conditions. The crowds, in addition to increasing avalanche risks and mountains of waste left on the slopes, have put a major strain on the Everest experience. And so, the Nepali government, in an attempt to deal with growing concerns about safety, environmental degradation, and local economic challenges, has introduced a series of bold new regulations to transform the Everest climbing experience for 2025 and beyond. First and most significant is the dramatic increase in permit fees. Starting September 1st, 2025, the cost to climb Everest during the fall season will jump from $11,000 to $15,000 per person. That's a 36% increase. The Nepali government says this jump is long overdue, with Tourism Minister Badri Prasad explaining, "We have the challenge to save the mountains at a time when rich countries are in the competition of physical development." While Nepal has been issuing Everest climbing permits since the 1950s, this marks the first major price increase in over a decade. This fee increase is part of Nepal's efforts to balance tourism revenue with environmental preservation. For many Nepalese communities, these mountains hold spiritual significance. Many locals consider mountains like Everest and Annapurna as deities, often facing their direction during prayer. So Nepal's responsibility to protect these natural wonders from the potential negative impacts of increasing tourism is not just environmental or economic, it's also spiritual. But that's just the beginning of the changes. Perhaps the most controversial new regulation is this: you can't climb alone anymore. According to the Kathmandu Post, the Nepal government is now completely banning solo expeditions on any mountain over 26,000 feet, which includes Everest. For years, solo climbs were what the best climbers in the world wanted to do. It was the ultimate individual achievement, but it was also incredibly risky. Because at those heights, what solo climbing truly means is that you're setting your own anchors and fixing your own ropes across gaping crevasses with nobody to double-check your work. You're making life or death decisions with an oxygen-starved brain as your fingers go numb from frostbite. When a sudden storm hits and you're huddled alone in your tent at 28,000 feet with the canvas flapping violently in negative 40-degree winds, there's no teammate to help you hold it down. If you slip on an icy ridge, there's no one to catch you. When hypothermia sets in and your thoughts become dangerously confused, there's no partner to recognize the symptoms and force you to descend. Every ounce of gear you carry, every route decision you make, every moment of suffering, it's all on you. That's what made solo Everest attempts so impressive. And now, that challenge is being legislated out of existence. The new regulations state that every single climber must now be accompanied by a Nepali guide, with a ratio of at least one guide for every 2 climbers. It's not actually a new rule. The ban was first introduced in 2017, but for years, enforcement has been inconsistent. With the right documentation, or in some cases through quiet agreements with expedition companies, climbers still found ways to do it alone. So what happened? Well, there's something that forced the government to take a much harder stance. Tiny detour on this chaos train. If you want more raw, uncut stories we can't show here, come join the Extreme community on Patreon. See you on the real Extreme Edge. In 2023, 478 climbers were granted permits to attempt the summit of Mount Everest. One of them was Szilard Suhada, a 40-year-old mountaineer from Hungary. Szilard was one of Hungary's most accomplished high-altitude mountaineers. Over the previous decade, he had successfully summited Broad Peak, K2, and Lhotse without bottled oxygen or personal Sherpa support. His reputation was built not on speed or stunts, but on a quiet commitment to what climbers call climbing by fair means, which meant climbing without artificial aid and with full respect to the mountain and its dangers. And in 2023, Szilard finally turned his eye on Everest. This expedition in 2023 was meant to be the final piece of that legacy. If successful, Suhada would have become the first Hungarian to climb Everest in this style. This is something less than 200 people in history have ever achieved, and with good reason. It's extraordinarily dangerous. Still, given his extensive experience, Suhada must have felt a deep sense of readiness and quiet excitement as he prepared for his historic ascent. By April 2023, Suhada arrived at Everest Base Camp and began his meticulous preparations. He acclimatized carefully and climbed progressively higher on the standard South Col route, closely following a precise plan. Then, on May 21st, 2023, Szilard began his final summit attempt. True to his style, he climbed without a Sherpa, without bottled oxygen, and without physical support on the mountain. But he wasn't completely alone. Szilard had a small team based at Everest Base Camp that monitored his progress and kept in contact with him through scheduled check-ins. He was also carrying a GPS tracking device, which allowed the team to follow his movements. On the morning of May 24th, he was last seen resting at a place called The Balcony, about 27,600 feet high. This location is deep in the death zone, where oxygen levels are so low that the human body feels like it is literally dying. In these conditions, even the most experienced climbers can get caught by surprise in an avalanche, develop altitude sickness, or simply make a mistake when their brain is operating on a third of the oxygen it's used to. Your decision-making gets compromised, your fingers and toes begin freezing. Every breath is a struggle. Now, imagine facing that completely alone, just as Szilard was doing. What probably made things even worse was the weather. Late May is when the weather on Everest starts to become extremely unpredictable. The pre-monsoon season that allows for summit attempts begins to give way to the full monsoon season, bringing heavy snow, fierce winds, and rapidly changing conditions. Local Sherpa guides know this transition well, as they've watched it claim lives year after year. Later that same day, other climbers reported seeing him again, this time near the Hillary Step, just 112 vertical feet below the summit. Witnesses noted that he was moving extremely slowly and looked completely exhausted. Yet, he was still upright and pushing forward. He had nearly reached his goal when suddenly, and without warning, Szilard's satellite tracker stopped transmitting. His support team lost all contact with him, and on the radio, there was only radio silence. By the next day, May 25th, a drone and several climbers saw what appeared to be a motionless body lying near the same spot. Though no one had any proof, it was believed to be Szilard. Was he still alive in that moment? Was he conscious, aware that help might be coming, or fading between moments of confusion and silence? Was he waiting and hoping that someone might appear out of the white haze? Or had he already let go? Just a few steps from the summit he had trained for all his life. No one knows. A rescue team was quickly sent to find him, but bad weather and the location made the mission difficult. By the time they reached the area, Szilard had disappeared. Some experts believe Szilard may have been caught in one of the sudden monsoon weather changes and was perhaps buried by unexpected heavy snow or disoriented in whiteout conditions when visibility dropped to zero in minutes. Who knows? What we do know is that Szilard, without a local guide who understood these seasonal patterns, was on Everest completely alone. Rescuers called out his name and searched frantically through the swirling snow, but there was no response to their calls and no sign of movement. After multiple attempts in increasingly dangerous conditions, with the weather worsening by the hour, the rescue team had no choice but to turn back. On May 27th, with all hope exhausted and options gone, the search was officially called off. Gillard Suhara was formally declared missing, presumed deceased. Of course, no one can ever know exactly what happened to Gillard in those final moments, but lingering questions remain. If he had been climbing with supplemental oxygen or accompanied by a Sherpa, could this tragedy have been prevented? Could a different approach or stricter enforcement of climbing regulations have changed the outcome? Although Nepali authorities never publicly cited Suhara's case directly, events like his disappearance clearly influenced their decisions. By 2025, they moved decisively to enforce a strict ban on solo expeditions to Everest, making guides mandatory for every climber. For them, stories like Gillard's had proven that the risks simply weren't worth it anymore. As Arati Nupani, director at the Department of Tourism, explained, the government has made guides mandatory to ensure the climber's safety on the mountain. And just like that, the era of the solo Everest climber is over. But that's not all the authorities are doing to ensure climber safety. In a new safety measure protocol, all climbers will now be required to carry advanced satellite tracking devices during their ascent. This requirement builds on the controversial tracking chip introduced in 2024, but with a major upgrade. The new devices, which cost around $500 each, are more than just GPS locators. They're small, rugged units that not only track a climber's location in real time, but also monitor vital signs like heart rate, body temperature, and blood oxygen levels. These devices transmit that data back to base camps and rescue teams through satellite signals, even when there's no cellular network. If the device detects abnormal readings, such as a drop in oxygen or extreme changes in body temperature, it can automatically alert rescue teams. The government hopes this upgrade will drastically reduce the time it takes to locate and rescue climbers in distress, potentially saving dozens of lives each year. Now, talking about saving lives, let's look at the most important changes in 2025, one that affects the true backbone of Everest expeditions, the Sherpa community. When people think of Mount Everest, they often imagine the climbers, the ones who reach the top. But the true heroes behind every successful climb are the Sherpas, the hidden heroes of Everest. Sherpas are an ethnic group from the Solukhumbu region in Nepal. They've lived in the Himalayas for centuries on the borders of Nepal and Tibet. The Himalayas are their home. Over time, they've developed physical traits that allow them to survive and thrive in high-altitude environments. Their bodies are naturally adapted to low oxygen levels, making them excellent climbers. This makes them invaluable when it comes to mountain expeditions, especially on Everest. Sherpas play two main roles on Everest: porters and guides. Porters carry heavy gear like tents, food, oxygen tanks, and other supplies up the mountain from base camp to higher camps. Many porters carry loads of up to 88 to 110 pounds, sometimes making several trips in one season. The Sherpa guides, on the other hand, are responsible for leading the climbers up the mountain. They know the routes, how to navigate dangerous sections, and where to place the ropes. Guides also ensure that climbers stay safe by watching the weather and the terrain, and by giving important instructions. As I said before, the Himalayas is their home, while foreign climbers treat it as the ultimate goal of their lives, a trip, an adventure. For Sherpas, it's their job. They make multiple trips on and off Everest multiple times in a season. To understand just how much Sherpas work and how important they are, look at it this way. When a foreign climber makes it to the summit, they typically cross the Khumbu Icefall, which is one of the most dangerous sections of the route, only 2 or 3 times. A Sherpa working on the same expedition, they might cross it 20 to 30 times in a single season, carrying oxygen tanks, setting up ropes, and hauling equipment to higher camps. The math is brutal. Out of the 335 people who passed away on Everest between 1922 and December 2024, 129 were Sherpas, or about 1/3 of the total. When you consider that Sherpas make up a small percentage of the total people on Everest, but account for 1/3 of these tragedies, the risk becomes clear. Those are odds that would be completely unacceptable in almost any other profession on Earth. And yet, despite the heavy risks they face, Sherpas are paid far less than what climbers pay for expeditions. A climber can pay up to $100,000 for their Everest expedition. Meanwhile, Sherpas usually earn between $2,000 and $6,000 per season. These harsh economic realities have led to growing discontent among the Sherpa community. Can you imagine risking your life 30 times through one of the deadliest sections of the mountain only to earn a fraction of what foreign expedition companies make? Can you imagine carrying 100-pound loads up deadly terrain where you can barely breathe, all for a wage far below what safer jobs offer? For decades, this imbalance has been an uncomfortable reality of Everest climbing, but in 2025, things are finally changing. Under the new regulations, expedition companies must provide significantly higher wages for Sherpa guides and support staff. They're also required to provide death and injury insurance, with coverage of up to 2 million Nepalese rupees, or approximately $14,400, for Sherpas working on the mountain. The insurance requirement is a big deal. In the past, when Sherpas passed away on the mountain, their families often received minimal compensation. In a region where a single Sherpa often supports an extended family, the death of a breadwinner could be economically devastating. The new insurance requirements ensure that families won't be left destitute if tragedy strikes. These changes didn't happen in a vacuum. They came after years of advocacy from Sherpa organizations and a threatened strike during the 2024 climbing season. When the threat of a Sherpa walkout loomed over Everest last year, it sent shockwaves through the mountaineering community. Without Sherpas, commercial expeditions on Everest would be virtually impossible. The government had to act, and the 2025 regulations represent their response. But will it be enough? But that's not all that's new. Major changes are coming to Everest Base Camp as well. In a bid to reduce the growing congestion and environmental impact, new regulations will limit the size and type of structures allowed at base camp. Gone are the days of luxury tents with full-service dining and entertainment areas. Starting in 2025, each expedition will be limited to basic sleeping tents, a communal dining tent, and essential support structures. Environmental concerns are also being addressed with stricter waste management policies. Remember the poop bags introduced in my last video, titled How 2024 Changed Mount Everest Climbing Forever? Well, they're not going anywhere. Climbers are still required to bring their human waste back down the mountain to prevent contamination of the environment and water sources. The waste management system has also been enhanced. Climbers are required to bring back at least 18 pounds of waste to reclaim their deposit, ensuring they're held accountable for properly disposing of their waste. Any climber who fails to comply could face huge fines and even a ban from future climbs. Let's not forget about the controversial helicopter regulations. In recent years, the use of helicopters in the Everest region has skyrocketed, with wealthy climbers using them to skip the demanding trek to base camp or even to hop between higher camps. This practice, known as heli jumping, has been criticized for giving privileged climbers an unfair advantage and contributing to noise pollution that disturbs local wildlife and communities. The new regulations aim to strictly limit helicopter use to emergency evacuations and essential supply deliveries. A no-fly zone has been established above base camp except for rescue operations, with hefty fines for violations. But perhaps the most cutting-edge development for 2025 is the expanded use of drones for supply management on Everest. Building on successful trials in 2024, the Nepalese government has approved the deployment of a fleet of high-altitude drones capable of delivering critical supplies to camps as high as Camp 3 at 23,500 feet. According to recent reports from the New York Times, these specialized drones can carry up to 44 pounds of equipment and operate in the extreme conditions of the higher camps. They're designed to reduce the risks faced by the indigenous Sherpa guides during expeditions. The drone program is a bit of a controversial one. Some purists say that it diminishes the raw challenge of Everest, but others love it because of the potential lives saved, particularly among Sherpas who make far more trips through dangerous sections than foreign climbers. In testing during the 2024 season, these drones successfully delivered oxygen bottles, medical supplies, and food to Camp 2 at 21,000 feet. The 2025 season will see this program expanded as regular drone deliveries are slowly becoming a standard part of Everest logistics. But it's not just drones and regulations changing the face of Everest. Infrastructure is too. A new road now connects Kathmandu more directly to the Khumbu region, significantly reducing the time it takes to reach the starting point for the Everest trek. The road is a huge change in how people experience the journey to Everest. Traditionally, the adventure began with a hair-raising flight to Lukla. From there, trekkers would spend about 10 days gradually making their way to base camp, a journey that allowed for proper acclimatization and immersion in the local culture. This road completely cuts that out. The journey now looks like this: 12 hours from Kathmandu to Saleri by public bus, then Saleri to Tamdanda by jeep, followed by a 6-hour walk to reach Lukla. This has cut the journey time from a week-long trek to a trip that can be completed in just 2 days. The road was completed in late 2024 and is currently being used by locals and trekkers alike. While this improved access has been welcomed by some, particularly locals who now have better access to healthcare and markets, others worry that it will lead to even more crowds and further commercialization of the region. However, I doubt it with the new rules and permit prices. Despite all of these changes, the fundamental challenges of Everest remain: extreme altitude that can quickly end climbers, brutal cold that freezes exposed skin in minutes, and sudden, violent storms that appear without warning. No amount of regulation can tame these deadly natural forces. So, while the new regulations and technologies may change how people approach Everest, they don't fundamentally alter what makes the mountain such a formidable challenge. It remains a test of human endurance, determination, and judgment that few will ever experience. As we look ahead to the 2025 climbing season and the following years, one question looms large: will these changes make Everest safer? We are going to find out. Want to support the channel? Join for exclusive perks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay bold and live brave.